1944. A British interrogation tent somewhere in Normandy. German prisoners, veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had faced Soviet artillery barrages that killed thousands in minutes, sat across from their captors and made an extraordinary claim. The British, they insisted, had deployed automatic artillery, rapid-fire field guns, weapons that simply did not exist. The interrogators exchanged glances. The prisoners were wrong. What they had faced was not a machine. It was men. This is the story of the Ordnance quick-firing 25-pounder, the field gun that fooled the Wehrmacht into believing Britain had invented impossible technology. More than 13,000 were built. They fired the opening barrage at Alamein. They were still killing enemies in 2015, 80 years after their introduction, and at their heart was a secret so simple it seems absurd, a steel disc the size of a dinner table. But first, you need to understand why this gun existed at all. To understand why Britain built the 25-pounder, you have to understand the humiliation that preceded it. The First World War had exposed British artillery as dangerously obsolete. The standard 18-pounder field gun and 4.5-inch howitzer were separate weapons requiring separate ammunition, separate training, separate logistics. When the guns needed to switch between direct fire and high-angle bombardment, entire batteries had to be replaced. The system was wasteful, slow, and inflexible. After 1918, the War Office knew it needed something better. The solution seemed obvious: combine both functions into a single weapon. A gun howitzer that could fire flat trajectories like a field gun and high arcs like a howitzer. One weapon, one ammunition supply, one crew trained for every tactical situation. But there was a deeper problem, one that would prove decisive 20 years later. Every major army in Europe relied on horses to move its artillery. The German Wehrmacht, despite its propaganda films showing endless columns of tanks and trucks, remained 80% horse-drawn for logistics. Each German infantry division required 5,300 horses and 1,100 horse-drawn vehicles just to function. When those horses died in Russian winters or African heat, the guns they pulled became anchors. Britain made a different choice. By 1939, the Royal Artillery had achieved something no other major power could claim: fully motorised divisional artillery. Every 25-pounder had a dedicated Morris Commercial or Guy Quad tractor. No horses, no dependency on fodder and water, no catastrophic losses when animals succumbed to disease or exhaustion. This decision would prove critical in North Africa, where water was worth more than ammunition, and a dead horse meant an abandoned gun. The Germans would eventually capture British 25-pounders and formally adopt them as the 8.76cm field gun 281, issuing them to reconnaissance battalions of the 15th and 21st Tank Divisions. The enemy recognised quality when they saw it, but motorization alone did not explain the 25-pounder's devastating effectiveness. Something else made this weapon different from every field gun that came before it. Something that looked primitive, almost ridiculous, until you understood what it could do. The secret sat underneath the gun, barely visible, easily overlooked, a flat circular platform that would change artillery doctrine forever. The No. 9 firing and turning platform looked like an afterthought, a steel disc slightly dished that crews dropped on the ground before wheeling the gun into position. Traditional artillery pieces used split-trail designs that dug into the earth, providing stability but limiting traverse to a few degrees in either direction. Changing targets meant physically manhandling the entire weapon, repositioning the trail spade, relaying the sights. Minutes of work. Under fire, minutes meant death. The 25-pounder's rubber wheels sat on smooth metal. A single soldier with a handspike could spin the entire 1,800-kilogram weapon through 360 degrees, faster than most guns could manage a few degrees mechanically. The platform transferred recoil forces directly into the ground, eliminating the need for a dug-in spade. When German tanks appeared from unexpected directions, which happened constantly in the fluid desert war, British gunners simply pivoted and fired. The Asbury breech mechanism completed the system, a vertical sliding block that combined unlocking, withdrawing, and swinging into one continuous motion. The brass cartridge case provided instant obturation, sealing the breech against escaping gases without the fumbling of separate bag charges that slowed other artillery. 7 different charge combinations, from the gentle red bag for close support to the full 3-bag supercharge for maximum range, allowed engagement at any distance up to 12,253 metres. The six-man crew worked as a synchronised machine. The sergeant commanded and called corrections. The breech operator rammed shells home. The layer aimed and fired. The loader inserted cartridges. The ammunition carrier kept rounds flowing. The fuse setter prepared each shell for detonation. Every movement was choreographed, drilled until it became unconscious. And here was the engineer's obsession that made the impossible possible. The designers refused to compromise on rate of fire. The standard combat rate was 6 to 8 rounds per minute. Intense fire pushed this to 5 rounds per minute sustained. But trained crews could achieve something that seemed to violate physics. The 4th Royal Field Artillery Regiment documented the record. 17 rounds in 60 seconds. 1 shell every 3.5 seconds from a weapon, requiring loading, aiming, and firing by hand. The barrel glowed red. The crews kept firing. George Blackburn, in his account of the Normandy campaign, described guns firing until their barrels changed colour, the steel protesting against treatment it was never designed to endure. Veterans across multiple theatres confirmed the same phenomenon. The weapons' limits were not mechanical, they were human. The German 10.5 centimetre light field howitzer 18 threw a heavier shell, 14.8 kilograms compared to the 25 pounder's 11.3. But its split trail limited traverse to 56 degrees. Its original range fell short at 10,675 metres. Its crews, no matter how well trained, could never match the British rate of fire, and its horses kept dying. The 25 pounder was never the biggest gun on any battlefield. It was simply better designed for how artillery actually gets used in modern war. Factories across Britain and Australia produced the 25 pounder in numbers that dwarfed any previous British artillery piece. The United Kingdom manufactured 12,253. Australia added another 1,527. Canada built both towed guns and the Sexton self-propelled variant. Total production exceeded 13,000 weapons, enough to equip every Commonwealth division with surplus for replacements. The guns saw first combat in France during 1940, covering the evacuation at Dunkirk. But their defining moment came 2 years later in the Egyptian desert at a railway halt called El Alamein. October 23, 1942, 9:40 in the evening, Major Richmond Gall of the 128th Highland Field Regiment watched his sergeant stare at his watch. The men on the guns stiffened. 1 more minute to wait. The sergeant counted down the final seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire! The flame of the hurricane lamp popped up the chimney. A cascade of sand fell on the plotting board, and the world filled with concussion and noise. Approximately 1,000 guns had fired as one. The barrage targeted German and Italian artillery positions first, systematically destroying communication cables. It took 40 minutes before Axis guns could reply effectively. The 2nd New Zealand Division's sector achieved a concentration of 52 guns per kilometre, one 25 pounder every 19 metres of front. Each gun expended approximately 4 tons of shells that first night alone. If you're finding this deep dive interesting, consider subscribing. It costs nothing, takes a second, and helps the channel continue. Now, back to the desert. The guns fired for 5 hours and 20 minutes. Over 12 days of fighting, each weapon averaged 102 rounds per day. More than 1 million shells fell on Axis positions. The Italian 102nd Motorized Division lost 50% of its infantry and most of its artillery. As Gall wrote afterward, Alamein was a gunner triumph. But not every gunner survived to celebrate. Sergeant Ray Ellis of the 107th Regiment, South Notts Hussars, fought at a place called Knightsbridge 4 months before El Alamein. His regiment received orders to fight to the last man in the last round and not to retire. They obeyed. Ellis fired until he had nothing left. His final round hit a Mark IV tank. Then a German tank appeared behind him. Its machine gun cut down the man standing next to him. Ellis took a deep breath and waited for his turn. For some reason, the tank did not fire. He spent the next year hiding in the Italian mountains, sheltered by a farming family. He returned to visit them every year until his death in 2014, at 94 years old. The 25 pounder was not perfect. Critics within the Royal Artillery itself argued the gun was too light for the battles it faced. The 11.3 kilogram shell lacked the destructive power of heavier German and American weapons. Against fortified positions, Against dug-in defenders in Normandy's hedgerows, the 25-pounder sometimes simply was not enough. Tank crews learned to respect it, but not to fear it the way they feared the 17-pounder anti-tank gun. By 1944, calls for a heavier replacement were growing louder. The gun's effective anti-tank range maxed out at 500 metres, with armour-piercing rounds. German tank armour kept getting thicker. The 25-pounder kept falling behind. But here is what the critics missed. The gun was never meant to win battles alone. It was designed to be part of a system. Fire missions concentrated 12 guns, then 24, then entire corps of 150 to 250 weapons on single targets within minutes. The 25-pounder's lightness meant mobility. Its mobility meant concentration. Its concentration meant that when one shell was not enough, 100 shells arrived together. The limitation was the proof. A heavier gun could never have achieved the rate of fire that convinced Germans they faced automatic weapons. The 25-pounder served British forces until 1967 as a primary field gun, with training use continuing into the 1980s. Ireland kept them in reserve until 2009, 72 years after introduction. But the gun's most remarkable chapter was already written, 30 years after the war, in a place most people have never heard of. July 19th, 1972. The Dhofar Rebellion in Oman, a small coastal town called Mirbat. 9 SAS soldiers and roughly 55 Omani troops held a training position. That morning, between 250 and 300 communist guerrillas emerged from the monsoon mists. Sergeant Talayasi Labalaba, a Fijian soldier 6 days past his 30th birthday, sprinted 500 metres across open ground to reach the gun pit where an old World War II 25-pounder sat waiting. The gun required 6 crew members. Labalaba was alone. He loaded the shell, loaded the propellant charge, aimed at point-blank range, fired, cleared the breech, repeated. 1 round per minute from a weapon requiring complex separate loading. The guerrillas closed to within yards of the pit. A bullet struck Labalaba in the chin. He radioed that he was badly injured and struggling to operate the gun. Then he kept firing. Another Fijian trooper ran 700 yards through enemy fire to help. He found Labalaba gave no indication he was injured. A bullet struck Labalaba in the neck. He died instantly on his last day before rotating home. The gun he died defending is now preserved at the Imperial War Museum. It was the last combat use of the 25-pounder by British forces, but not the last combat use anywhere. In 2015, Kurdish Peshmerga forces fired 25-pounders against positions near Mosul, Iraq. 80 years after the gun's introduction, some weapons refused to become obsolete. Today, memorial guns stand in dozens of Commonwealth locations. Operational ceremonial examples still fire salutes in Ireland, South Africa, India, New Zealand, Singapore and Malta. The charge bags are still red, white and blue. Somewhere in Normandy in 1944, German prisoners sat in an interrogation tent and insisted the British had deployed automatic artillery. They were wrong. What they had faced was not a machine. It was 6 men, a steel disc, and a willingness to fire until the barrel glowed red. Some things cannot be automated. Some things require humans who refuse to stop. The 25-pounder was never the most powerful weapon on the battlefield. What made it decisive was not its size, but the speed, coordination, and discipline of the crews who served it. Steel and engineering mattered, but it was human endurance that turned a good gun into a battlefield legend. For those of you who served with artillery, or perhaps had family members who did, I would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think made the 25-pounder so effective compared to its contemporaries? Was it the design, the training, or something else